All right, a little demo on Socket.io and Node.js and using MongoDB. I had previously put this in an earlier session or lecture, but it got cut off. I guess my battery was dying, so you didn't see that part of it. So I'm redoing it. This is Redux, so I'm doing it a second time. Hopefully, I'm not losing this video here. So what we want to do is we want to take we have an existing application and we want to use this Socket.io library, which is really great. Allows you to do a lot of real-time stuff across that WebSocket. It has a really nice documentation, and in real time you can actually create some type of chat or some kind of synchronous kind of real time experience, right, across this whiteboard here. If I can actually show that quickly, because if we didn't actually go through this or somebody didn't see it, it's worth seeing. So as have two clients here across the socket in real time, we are actually seeing it in each other's pane, right? You can just imagine you could be wherever, you could be across the world, or you could be, in the same room. Basically, you're sharing that socket, that connection over that TCP/IP layer, and we are getting real-time data instead of some kind of delayed kind of HTTP request. So we want to use this library, which is really great for Node.js. And again, we have all the documentation in there is under getting started, and documentation. There's not much really to this library. It's pretty short and sweet. And basically, this will go through and show you how to make a basic chat. We went a step further, and we already kind of talked about some of the stuff, but we went a step further, and we're trying to persist to a Mongo database. We have some seed data that's previously there. So I have a database full of restaurants, and inside of my restaurants here, I have just a bunch of sample data. Bronx, Morris Bake Shop, Staten Island, Joey Burgers, these kind of things, right? We have city, cuisine, name, and restaurant ID, and we pre-filled this data, and this is in our MongoDB, our NoSQL database. So what we want to do is we want to use Node.js. We want to include Mongoose, which is the wrapper on top of MongoDB. The wrapper gives us a lot of really nice features that allow us to query directly and then get objects back. And then we want to use Socket.io and create a connection from the server to the client, and quickly, just because we're not dealing with a real web UI or any kind of framework or React or Angular, we just have a very static HTML page here. And in our HTML page, we just have a couple of buttons. I may have dressed it up a little bit just to make kind of the buttons and things look a little nicer with CSS, but really the bare bones of it is it's just a couple buttons that make a request with the library across the socket, and then the Node.js intercepts that call, queries MongoDB, and just sends it back in the console window. So I have one wired up. When I click Get Restaurants, it's going to go through and it's going to return just the restaurant name, and that's it. What we want to do is we want to go and wire up. We want to create, so existing already is we have a restaurant model. So the task is to create an order schema for our database, and then we want to wire this button up so it'll go and get the orders, and then we want to be able to place an order here, which is going to be just a message to the back, and we'll have some hard-coded stuff in the background. But it's just basically showing the connection going back and forth. So if we quickly look at the code, and if you're not familiar with this, we'll quickly go to Socket.io here. So on the client side, we have this library. It's this nice library called, so a bunch of jQuery in here. If you don't know what jQuery is, it's a JavaScript library for selecting DOM elements. So we have the Socket.io library, and the library is has the same markup, whether it's client, same API, whether it's client or server, which is really nice. So you don't have to relearn things depending on where you are across that channel. Some styling there. So in our jQuery document model, so basically what this does is it says when the window has loaded or it's ready. That's a jQuery right here, this $, and that basically stands for jQuery. You could actually, I believe, just say, I think it was jQuery dot document ready. You could do that as well, but really the short form for jQuery is the $. And how was it like that? Let me just revert it back. So it was like, it was $, right? Because that's a jQuery object. It's a document, so it's basically wrapping the entire document of the page in a jQuery object, and now we have some functions attached to that. So what we're doing is we're going to make a connection across that socket, which is the server, localhost port 8080. We're setting up our event listeners. We don't need this one anymore. That was from another example. So we just have a basic connect on socket connect. So when the server triggers an emitting a message emitting up to the client, say I'm connected, we're going to catch it here because we're creating a listener. And when we capture that, we're going to do a function call. It's going to say server is connected. At the same time, if they disconnect, which could be from one of our buttons here. So if we trigger this button here, disconnect, it should say server disconnected, and then I'm going to say reconnected, server's connected. So it's making that request back to the channel, the server, and then it's listening for the response. So these things handle the response. We have this one already for restaurant data, which when the data is returned from the server, it goes in the console, logs it. And what we want to do is we want to create two new ones here. So I already kind of wired them up because I want to set those up. So we're already here, so let's actually do this here, just so I don't have to go looking for this. So I'm going to set up one called orders data, and that's going to be my listener. And I'm going to have a callback function. Now I'm going to use my ES6 syntax, which is like the arrow function. It's not the fat arrow function, it's the arrow function. And we're just going to console log that the server, okay, order data received from server. For now, let's just leave that. Okay, we're not gonna do any more than that at the moment. And then we're gonna actually do one for, so we're gonna do one for this, which is called the order data was added. And we're just gonna wire this up, and we're gonna say order data, same type of thing. We're gonna say, sorry, we are gonna type, we're not gonna say it. We're gonna code a listener for on order data added, and then we're gonna have a console log message saying the same thing. We're gonna say something like console log server added order data or something like that. Just some kind of message so we know that the communication is going back and forth. So what we're going to do is just basically set up that communication. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to trigger off those buttons, and we're going to catch it at backend server, and we're going to emit it as well. So what we need to do, so that's listening now for the server. So now we need to send the actual message to the server, and to do that, because listening is on, that's basically on this event from the, it's going to listen for the event listener. So now we need to trigger an event, because what we're using is something called event emitter, and this in Node.js and a lot of these things they inherit from the base class event emitter, and usually there's a listener and there's an emitter, and you need to trigger an event which has a callback, and then when it's done, it triggers any listeners to respond. So basically we need to emit. So we need to emit to a listener. So as you can see already, there's one already. So what we want to do is these button clicks here. So get order and create order, which is place order actually. These two buttons here. Right now they are just console logging alert. Sorry, they're not console logging. They're just throwing an alert box up. We want to actually console log, or we want to emit. We want to send a message to the server. So right here, we don't need to use this anymore, so we want to do what, like we did above. We want to say socket, which is the client, emit, get orders. So we're emitting to the server that we're going to get orders, and then at the same time, we are going to say socket.emit, add order, and we're going to listen because our listener is ready. So now that's done from the client side. So if we were to go right there and refresh and cross our fingers, there's no errors. You never know, right? All right. So if I go to get restaurants, it's good. So now it's not doing anything right now anymore. You notice that the pop-up's not showing up anymore because I'm emitting something, but there's no listeners on the back end, so nothing's going to happen. So what we need to do is go back to the back end server. And we'll quickly go over this quickly because if you're new to this, you may not know what we're doing. So I have a package I installed using npm install which subsequently added to my node modules here, and socket.io got loaded up, and those are all the dependencies in there. So I require that. Then I have a model. So now I'm using Mongoose, right? So we have this model that is a wrapper around the Mongo data. By the way, this is my Mongo daemon because I have the server running in the background. You need to kick off the daemon from the installed file of MongoDB. If you don't have this running, then you may not have this. Your connection may not work. Things like Combo Atlas here, sorry, Combo Atlas, Mongo Compass won't run either unless you have that process running. You can automatically trigger that in your taskbar, but I manually trigger it. So we have this. Documents here. So what we want to do is we want to use Mongoose to create a wrapper around it. So first we need to do is we need to create a schema, and basically a Mongoose schema, which is a representation of that document. So I require this package called Mongoose, and then I say Mongoose, new mongoose.schema, and I give it the restaurant schema. And now that I have the schema, I wire it up. I say mongoose.model, which creates the model of it, the wrapper, the representation of that document. And then I export it to the world or the caller saying now I have a model, which now attached to it I can do such thing as CRUD operations, queries, a bunch of things. There's some lifecycle hooks. There's a lot of validation things you can do. We're just focusing on querying and some CRUD operation, in particular the create. So that's that, and then we include that model into the server. In a couple minutes, we're going to have to go and create an order model and do the same thing. Quick review here. We include Mongoose, and then we have our connection string to localhost, and we quickly go and make a connection to it. And then if we connect, it'll actually give us using promises. It'll say Mongoose connected successfully. Otherwise, if the promise is rejected, it's going to say Mongoose cannot connect to the database. And then there's a bunch of stuff in Node that just serves up the web server and returns back that index.html, this page we're talking about here. That's all that does. And then we get into our socket.io. Again, review, it goes and creates a listener to socket.io on that server that we have started up. And then we have our socket.io server, the connection. And we first set this basic listener called connection, and that's what we saw in the beginning. When it's connected, it'll say we have a client connected, connection accepted. We also listen for the disconnect. So here we have our existing on socket listener for get restaurants, and it's a callback function that says to the console, we got this message, we got it. And then we are using our Mongoose wrapper. So I have that model, and on it there's a find method. And there's a whole bunch of methods too, by the way. If you care to look, there's a whole bunch of things. Delete many, delete one, find by ID and delete, find, a whole bunch of different things that you may want to tie into, replace, where, all these different things, right? That you can easily use, and it's very useful. So anyways, we have an error first callback, and if we catch the error, we output that we couldn't do something with that query. Otherwise, we get that data, and what we did is instead of outputting the raw data, I mapped it using this ES6 mapping array, and I just mapped the name out, and then I emit back to the listener on the client that I have the data, and it's going to output it to the console. So it's going to hit this listener up here that we have already set here, and it's going to console log the data. And that's what you see when you trigger that button there. So in the console window, I can clear the console, click restaurants. There, I see that data there. So what we want to do is, again, wire up these. I'm already sending emitting messages that nobody's looking for. So now I just need to do the same thing, and then we want to console log that we got the request, and then we know we can go from there. So what I want to do here is, where am I? So I have to go back to the server. So I already know what I need to do. So what do I need to do? All right, so I need to do the same listener now on the server side. So I need to go socket, which is the client, on, and I can say not join, say on, get order, get orders, and I need to do a callback function, arrow syntax, and all I want to do is just say console log, I want to say server, get orders, called, right? Or received, whatever you want to call it. You could say received, doesn't matter. Same kind of thing here. I need to do add order, so I'm not going to fill it in yet. I'm just going to socket.on, add order, and I have the callback function that's going to just console log that we have the request. We have the request, sorry about that. The brackets need to match up. Console.log, add order, server, add order called. It's really received. All right, and if you notice, I have NodeMon running in the background here, so it's constantly watching my file and restarting. So now when I go trigger this, it should catch on both sides. Let's place an order. Get. All right, what happened there? So something didn't fire. What about place order? Uh-oh, something didn't fire. So maybe I need to refresh. Did that actually work? All right. Server. So it did actually say added order. So it is actually doing it. So something's off here with my connection here. So there may be outside the scope here. Let me just quickly take. Oh, you can see here in my connection here, it is actually catching add order called, get order called. So I know it's actually, of course, I forgot the step, right? I'm just capturing it, right? I'm not actually sending back up to the client attached to the channel. And what I need to do is, of course, like up here, I need to actually emit that data. So I need to grab something like this, and I need to actually emit back up to the client. And I already have this here, order data. So I don't need this right now. So I need to call orders data like that. And at the same time, I need to also, from the server, I need to call order data added. And then I need to trigger that. All right, so now it's rebuilding. Now when I trigger this, cross the fingers, we should have something saying get orders. All right, order data received from the server. There's no data yet. Place order, server disconnected. Well, that's not good. Let's see here again. So there's probably nothing going on. Get orders, connect. What happened here? So something happened. Let's see what the error is at the bottom here. App crashed while waiting. So it says data is not defined. Right. If you can notice here, that's true. There is no parameter called data. So live programming. What can I say? Clear this console out. We click get orders. Oh, sorry. We click connect. Get orders. What's happening now? All right. Let's take a look again. So it says it's connected successfully. And maybe I just need to reboot it a little bit. So let's see. Get orders connected. Refresh. Okay. Get data. Get orders. All right. Place order. So something here threw an error in the emitter. All right. So, but we know at least that we have some syncing going on. So I'll quickly debug it so I don't waste your time, and then I'll come back and we'll actually add an order and try to place that data in a Mongoose. All right, so of course this makes sense. If you notice here, I don't have in a callback. I'm just console logging, which that's going to throw a little bit of an error. So I need to actually wrap this in a callback function. Otherwise, it's going to cause an error. It's not. It's trying to trigger a callback function in itself. It's just a console log. So let's see with that improvement here. If we clear this out, and if I place the order, and I place the order, all right, uncaught exception. Again, you need sometimes to clear your cache. Again, let's see, get orders, place order. All right, there you go. Again, so if you're using debugging tools here, and sometimes your JavaScript is cached inside a browser, you need to go to the reload page and then hold down on that, and then you'll get this normal reload, hard reload, and empty cache and hard reload. So I always do that. That means your UI will refresh the cache because the client script will do that in the browser. So anyhow, we have that working now. We know what we're getting. So now the UI is ready to receive data. All right, so what we need to do next is we need to go to our project and go to the model folder, and we need to create an orders model. So we need to create an orders.js. All right, let's just go new file, order.js. Inside that order, I already know what I want to put in there, so I'm gonna paste it. So what I did here is I created Mongoose. I included Mongoose. I created an order schema using new Mongoose schema. Order type is string. It's optional because you have some optional thing. I have an item here with the type of string. It's required. That's some of the great stuff about Mongoose is you can actually require system required and validation on there and default types and those kind of things that you can't necessarily do with MongoDB. Customer, and then we set up the model here, mongoose.model, and then we export the order. So now that we have that, we need to do the same thing inside the server. We need to go back to the top where we have our model being brought in. So we want to say order, bring in that order model, require it, and we need to find it in our folder structure, dot model folder. Sometimes you need to do dot slash just to find things in your current directory, slash order. So now we got that. So that's what we got. So now we have access to the order. We can actually query some data. So let's go here. We will actually, and if you don't have any existing data or database, and you go to save one, it'll actually create the collection for you in the back end. I already have a collection there because I'd already been working with this previously, so I know it should work right when I actually go to query it. So when I go to query this, so I'm going to use order, the order model order. Now on this I have some Mongoose, some methods. So I go dot find, and that is going to accept a query, which I'm going to leave as empty. So it's going to be brackets. So inside of that you could have a bunch of and or statements. And then I'm going to do a callback function, and that's going to pretty much expect that there's going to be some kind of data coming back there. So there's error first, and there's going to be data, which is the document. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to console log the data. And then what I want to do is send that data, emit data has been found eventually, and send that data back up the wire. So if you don't know much about, all right, so inside of this call here, I am going to just do that first. But I can actually do some chaining with, with promises. But let's try this. This is going to do a callback function. When it comes back, it's going to output the data. Let's see if it works. All right, so we'll take a stab at this. All right, get orders. It says it's returned from the server. Let's look at the server. It did actually find the list. So there's a bunch of data in there, so that's great. We're not handling the fact that it could fail, but anyhow, we have that. So what we want to do is emit something, so we can actually, if you hover over this, you can actually pass data along the pipeline. So I want to pass data along the pipeline. I want to console log it. So inside of my index.html, I need to do the same thing here and modify this call. So right now you can see that it's just console logging. It does not return any data. So if we use the hint of the one above it, the restaurant data, you can see that data will be passed up in this function, and I can actually output it. So I'm going to have to use this ES6 template. I don't have to do that. Actually, I could do this. Again, this is the older school way of doing it, doing plus to concatenate. And the data may end up looking a little bit messy, to be honest, but because there's no spacing in there, I need to actually put the space in there a couple times for it. You can see why this template literal up at the top here is so nice, right? You can just, it'll respect the spaces for me, and it'll populate that value. Here's old school way of doing concatenation. Let's see if this works. It may not work. Again, you have to go back to your UI. You need to do the hard code refresh, hard empty cache, and let's try to get the orders. All right. So if you notice, it's returning back a bunch of array lists, and that's not what we want. But for now, that's all right. So what you need to do is you need to, I believe, if I can remember correctly off the top of my head, you need to go back to the server, and you need to turn that into a JSON data. So you need to do something like, I think it's JSON to stringify, or is it stringify to JSON? Something like that. I forget what it actually is, to be honest. But you have to convert that into a stringify. There you go. Stringify. So what that says is converts a JavaScript value to a JSON object. So this should be a little bit better for us. So if we stringify that, go back to the front end, and we clear our console out. Let's try to take a look at that now. So there you go. So there's a lot of data in there, and we might want to map that down so it makes a little bit more sense to us, but that's all our data. So that's great. So we'll clean that up in a second. We're going to wire up the place order, and then we should be good. And I'll just come back in a second. All right, so I tweaked it a little bit just so that so I could actually get some get a smaller payload to the front end, so I can actually see what I'm doing. So I changed the payload to name and item, so you can see name Tony Soprano, and he ordered a salami sandwich. Pistol Pete, steak and cheese. TikTok, liver and onions, extra large pizza. Right, so like some Soprano names here, just for some fun data, I guess. I don't know, just to amuse myself. All right, so what I did is quickly is I went through and I used the document.map. So I just changed it around a little bit to say that I'm getting a document back, and then I'm mapping it, but I'm returning only what I need. So I'm returning for each one, I'm returning an object, which is a literal. I just want the name and I want the item for myself, and then I'm returning that out of the. It's going to return an array. That's what the map function does. The prototype on the array returns another array of your transformed values, and I just JSON.stringify that. So now I know it's working. I love that, the fact that it's cleaner. So now what we want to do is we want to go and we want to wire up this add order now. So when somebody clicks the button, I want to create an order. So I want to use one of the Mongoose methods on that order method. So let's try to do that here. So we're going to say order, and I know that there's a bunch of finds on there, but we want create. So create is going to take some type of criteria. And then after that, it's going to return a promise. So if you don't know about promises, there's two states, a fulfilled and a rejected. So you can chain off of that. So there's a .then. So when the promise returns, I can actually have a callback function inside of there, some way of handling it inside of the callback. And we could actually say, console log success for now. And you can also chain off of that. You can say .catch, because it can have an error portion. And we have a callback in there that we could say, it will return an error. And my arrow function, I can say console log.error, what happened, and then close that off, and then close that off. I click save. This prettier I have installed will actually go through and put this on different lines in here. So, all right, so I have that, and I might want to move up the fact that the order was added. I want to add that emitted item up here inside of the promise fulfilled, that success. So now I know when something's created, it's going to say, yes, something was created. It's not going to return the fact back that it's not going to tell you what was created, but it's just going to say it did have success. I could also throw an emit. I could add another one to expand this to say, no, there was an error when I, order data not added, there was an error or whatever. You could say more descriptive to your client. Anyhow, but right now, it may throw an error, may not. It's going to probably add an empty record because we didn't actually add anything inside of it. So you can either put the markup of the schema in here, right? You could actually put name and whatnot, name Johnny whatever burger whatever in here, right? Or you could actually move that out of here, so it's a little cleaner. You could actually have a query, not a condition. You could say this is data to add or something like that, to add, or whatever you want to say. And inside of here, you could actually add that data to add there. So that's the document. It's more of a document to add, I guess. So we could actually say document to add, document, doc, because that's what we're saving in MongoDB is a document. And we could say this is now going to be, I don't know, small pizza, because he's cutting back. Small pizza. All right, so now if we go back to this, it should actually save it, and then it should come back and say to the client that there was no problem. Let's try it out. So let's clear this, place the order here. It says it added the order. Let's look at no errors. It said there was success. It said it actually did. If we go to query now, we should see it right there. So it did actually add. So that's good. That's what we were hoping for. All right, so so now we may need to, now that that's all working, that's great. So that's using our CRUD operator, that's using our query operator, but we haven't really used our logical operators or some of our filtering, because there's more we can do. Say when I get orders, I want to get a specific order, like get order. Maybe I don't want to see all these guys. Maybe I want to just get one type of order, right? So we could actually take a look at that. And what we could do is go back to our socket.io, go to the part where we have the find. And if you noticed, I have the empty condition here. And you can do it inline, or you could put the condition outside. So I have a parameter so customers TikTok and liver and onions. So maybe I want to just pull all those records out. Maybe I just want to do the one I just added, right, which was small pizza. It's making me hungry here, to be honest. Small pizza. All right, so then we know we could pass this entire object in the filter, or we could just pass the condition like this. All right, so now that we save it, now it's being used. when we go back to this, we should just get the one we added. So get orders. All right, it says data received, one item. Now if we go to place an order again, it's going to place the same order. When we add this, it should return 2. So it's returning 2. So that's great. That's what we want. But we can also, add more. So I just want to show another example of adding some more features onto this. So we could actually say get restaurant, and I'm going to change that so it actually adds a little bit more data. I want it to look a little bit nicer. I want to add two fields. So I'm going to quickly do that, and then demo that. All right, I quickly adjusted that. So now it's sending back just the JSON object that has the restaurant name and the city. As you can see there, and what I did was the same thing I did before, which was to use the map function, and I just used the data, which is the restaurant, and I just pulled out the fields I wanted to, and then returned it, and then of course I JSON stringified. So what I want to do next to wrap it up is I want to just grab all of the restaurants that are in Queens. So I want to add all of that. So what I can do is inside of here, I could do this. I could say, what was I talking about here? City equals to Queens, like that. So now when I go to the front end, it should query that. All right, so now it's returning, as you can see, just the item, the restaurants from Queens. Bruno's on the Boulevard, Big Tony's Sandwich Buffet, the Godfather Panini Express, right? So now what I want to do is even further. Okay, well, quickly I can actually show that, this is the object literal, and when you get into and ors in there, then you end up getting like this and, and then arrays, and then you need another kind of JSON object. Like it gets a lot of brackets in there. It gets you gotta. I don't really like it particularly. It's a little bit tedious, to be honest. So what you can do is you can do chaining. So you could actually come up to this and say, well, first of all, you're going to need to exect. You're going to need an exect on this. Sorry, you're going to need an exect. How does this go again? Right, you're going to do the exect. So what this does, now I'll look at the syntax in a second to make sure it runs, but so you're doing find, and that's going to return back a query object that doesn't, because there's no callback, it won't get fired right away. You need to do this dot exect. So you could actually, to be honest, let's try this. Let's try it out. We could say query equals to find, and then later on we do query dot exect in 2 steps. Let's see if that works. And it didn't blow up in our faces here. All right, so we go get restaurant. All right, still worked. So we are separating that out a little bit. Sorry, we are separating that out. But what I wanted to show is that you can actually now, instead of doing inside the find, you can actually do chaining here. You can do dot where, and you can say dot where the value name is the name. Sorry, it was city. Am I typing here? City, and we can say dot again. So there's a bunch of things on there. Equals. There's also greater than, less than. These are the operators, the logical operators. But in Mongoose, right? Mongoose has the wrapper. So one of the powers of it is you don't have to do the traditional inline queries that you would with the MongoDB queries. You can actually use this chaining, which is really great, I think, for in the vein of promises and that kind of dot in IntelliSense. I feel it's cleaner for me, and it makes me feel like I don't need to worry about a lot of brackets. So where dot equals to Queens, and I'm sure you can actually lowercase it. And when I press save, it's going to nicely tidy that up. So now I have my query on one line and I'm executing it. Let's actually try to go and look and see if I get the same expected result. All right, so I got the same expected result. But now I want to go further. I want to look at the name now, and I want to filter out just the one that has Big Tony's in it. So I want to filter out like a like keyword. So like select all from restaurants where city equals Queens and name is like wildcard big, like in SQL Server, we would do something like that. So one last thing before I let you go, I'll show you how to do that. So you can actually do another where chain, and maybe we might want to put on 2 lines just so it's a little cleaner. So we could actually say, okay, dot where, and we want to say name. And in order to do wildcarding, you need to do something called regex, and I have it already saved here, right? So you do dot regex, So regex, if you don't know, is regular expressions, and there's a whole bunch of ways. And even to be honest, I need to look up at the documentation because it gets really crazy. There's a lot of different wildcarding, but here is just a really simple one. It says where city equals to Queens and where the name is like big. So let's go back and let's see if this works. Quickly, we click get restaurants and we return one record from Queens with big in it, Big Tony's Sandwich Buffet. All right, so that was a good example, to be honest. Just to show, we showed how we can add Mongoose schemas and create models against our underlying Mongoose database that has collections and documents. We showed how we can use it in Node.js. We showed how we can use Socket.io to create listeners and emit events. And then we tied it all together, and then actually showed how to do some CRUD operations, use some querying, and then actually use a little bit of filtering as well. So using all of this, I think you can figure out a way to make an application in this way, whether it be a chat application or a gaming application or something like that. And you could show how you could actually persist some of the activity and actions back to a database. All right, so that's all for now. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.